Hi, Megan.
Hey, Sarah. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Did you, by any chance, watch Real Housewives of Beverly Hills premiere this week?
No, I need to get caught up on it. I know there's
Okay.
some drama going on with Kyle, right?
Yes. Okay. So I really want your opinion on it. So you'll have to watch it and we'll come back to this topic. But
Okay.
I love Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I've been an avid watcher since the beginning. I dabble in the other franchises, but not so much. But this is the one franchise I really love. Just like the women are so glamorous and this
They
super
are.
luxurious like lifestyle. It's really fun to watch. And I really like all of them. And up until this year, Kyle and Mauricio, her husband, they've just been like couple goals, like so amazing, this beautiful family, and
Mm-hmm.
so loving and affectionate with each other. And the bomb has gone off. They're not together anymore, it appears. It's just all very bizarre and doesn't make sense. And I mean, like the rest of the world, we're all dying to know, like, is this something just for the show? Is any of this real? Is all of it real? um, but you'll have to watch it. It's going to be a crazy season.
Yeah, I saw a headline recently that Kyle saw Mauricio holding somebody else's hand. I think he was on Dancing with the Stars and he was holding his
Yes.
partner's hand. And it seems like the two of them might have something cooking at this point, but I'm not sure. But it seemed like it hurt her feelings. But my understanding of it was that she had maybe cheated on him first. So I
With
I
Have
don't
you
know what's
watched the
going on.
video that she's in? Oh my gosh, I couldn't even watch the whole thing. It like made me sick to my stomach just watching like because she seemed like this amazing wife and mom
Yeah.
and they had this beautiful family and it appears that she's put this music video out before the news that she may not be in her marriage anymore, so that was pretty shocking.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
it's
Okay.
really bizarre and
Sounds like
maybe
a
I'm just super
mm.
gullible and it's all for TV and she's an actress.
Yeah, you wonder how much of that is real, but yeah,
I
I
know.
mean, marriages breaking up though, that's real. I mean, especially if they're filing for divorce, part of that is real. So,
You're right, right. I
I
know it's
don't
so
know.
heartbreaking. But
That is
anyways, let's
heartbreaking.
you watch it and let's
Okay.
look back on this and talk about it again. How are you?
Okay.
What's going on with you?
Yeah. Oh, Sarah, I have sad news for you, given that I know you
What?
love Porsches. I
Yes.
crashed my Porsche bad.
What?
Yeah, I
Megan.
know. It's really sad.
Wait,
Luckily, I mean, it is going to be able to be fixed. It's not totaled. That was my
oh,
major
thank
concern. I,
goodness.
I want the car back because we
Yeah.
custom made it and things like that. And so I'm like, part of it's like the specialness of it, having thought of it myself and put it together and stuff like that to buy it.
Mhm.
Um, Luckily, it's going to be able to be fixed, but I was at a stoplight, stopped at a stoplight. The light turned green, and then somebody ran a red light from my left, and it was sort of a blind left right there because there's like this mound of dirt, and I'm going under an overpass. And she came flying out from my left-hand side, and we both turned our wheels as hard as we could, and I got the side of her Tesla, the whole side of her Tesla. I got it from the
Oh.
side, but I did not run that red light, she did. And I tried to tell that to
Oh.
the police and things like that, but they don't take testimony, at least in the state of California. They don't take anything like that or even make a police report if there's no injuries. And luckily for both of us, there were no injuries. So we're lucky in that respect. But the bad thing is that my sweet Porsche is now in the car shop and is going to be there for
Oh.
probably another month.
Another month. Oh my gosh. Is the
Yeah.
damage significant?
It's pretty significant. Yeah, it got the front right part of my car. So it got pretty much all the aesthetics got messed up,
Mhm.
but the engine is fine. The
Oh,
frame
thank
is
goodness.
okay. Yeah. So luckily that's the case. Otherwise, I don't know how much worse it could have been for the damage. But yeah. So it was
Was
like
the
sort of up.
was the
Oh
point of
yeah.
impact crazy? Do you need to go to
Yeah.
the doctor?
I
Were you
don't.
alone?
I was alone. I was okay. Like I had no injury besides like my neck hurt maybe a couple days afterwards, but other
Oh.
than that, it sort of went away, you know. So I was okay. I was really really lucky, and the engineers and the people who are working on my car now said that the Porsche withstood that crash the way it should have. It absorbed in the
Oh,
right manner.
wow.
It insulated me so that I didn't get any injuries. I'm really grateful for that. And I think that
Mhm.
it's built like on the Audi um, platform. So if you think
Mm,
about like the safety ratings that Audi gets, that pertains to our Porsche also. So, and I know
mm,
you have the same model as me. So
mhm.
it's really good to know that it's such a safe car, and that even though I got in that
Yes.
accident, and that's my first accident I've ever been in. I've
Oh,
never been in any
really?
other accident. Yeah.
Oh,
So it was
wow.
shocking.
Oh,
Yeah, I was
yeah, it was.
shaking. Yeah.
Did you call your husband to come pick you up from the
I
spot?
did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
I did.
the car couldn't drive, I'm assuming.
No, it was actually drivable, and hers
Oh,
was
wow.
also. So we both were able to drive separately, drive back to where we were. We just took ours straight to the dealership. But the police officers, they were so kind. Three different police cars came when I called, and they're
Oh,
like, "Ma'am,
nice.
are you okay? It's okay. You are okay." I was like shaking and stuff like
Oh,
that.
were you
So
crying?
I wasn't crying.
Oh,
I was just in utter shock. I could not
yes.
believe what had just happened. It was like, this is somebody else's life. Like it was not mine. And it was like unreal for a little while. And then it came
Oh,
to,
thank
it's okay.
goodness you were alone and you didn't have your
I
girls in the
know.
car.
I know.
Like,
But pro tip, if you get in a car accident and there's car seats in your car, even if there's no kids in them, those car seats must be replaced. You can't
oh,
keep those any
really?
longer. Yeah. So the
Oh,
insurance told me that. So I was like, okay, well that's interesting. So we have to get rid of our old ones. Luckily we had a couple of extras we were able to just keep using, and we have another car we can use in the
mhm.
meantime. But yeah, it's been an ordeal, and dealing with
Oh,
insurance, my insurance and her
mhm.
insurance, and oh my goodness. But
Does
it's over
she,
now.
is she admitting that it was her fault?
No.
Of
And
course
she's
not.
not turning over. Teslas collect video on all sides of the car, and they also collect
Hmm.
telemetry. So I immediately asked her insurance, please retain that and we can use it, you know, for the
Hmm.
case. But she does not have to turn it over, especially if it's not in her favor, which I know that it's not. So she doesn't have
Oh,
to, by law, turn that over, even though it
over.
would be good evidence for me.
Yeah.
So it ends up like it's just going to be 50-50, no one's at fault.
Mm.
That sort of is the determination. So we're okay, we're fine. Like I'm glad and grateful that the worst thing that happened is just a little bit of damage to a car and we can get it fixed. But
Oh,
still, you know, it's the
yes.
Porsche.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that that happened. I know
Thank
to
you. It's my
along those
baby.
lines, something funny. So I grew up saying Porsche, and then you corrected me that it's Portia. So my girls call it Portia, which they think is cute because they love the character from the movie Sing too, who is named
Oh yeah,
Portia. And
that's
they have
right.
a second cousin named Portia. So they think it's a really beautiful,
Oh.
pretty name. But
Hmm.
I periodically will still say Porsche because that's how I grew up. And I said Porsche the other day, and my 3-year-old looked at me and she said, Mama, it is Porsche. And I was like, noted, noted.
Her sassy self.
I know.
I love that. That's so
It was
cute.
so funny.
She's
I
not
know.
wrong. Oh, that's
Oh,
so funny.
I know.
Well,
Well,
yeah. So
I'm sorry
everything's
that happened.
okay. Yeah, thank you. It's
I'm
it's
glad
all
you're
it's all
okay.
good, but yeah, thank you. I'm just glad to
So,
have no injuries, and that the Porsche is just such a phenomenal safe
ugh.
car.
Yes, and
So,
that
yeah.
it's going to be okay. The time a
Yeah.
month will fly by.
Yeah, true.
Well, welcome everyone to Platinum Perspective, the podcast about beauty, travel, luxury, and more. I'm your co-host, Sarah.
And I'm Megan. Sarah and I are best friends who put the work in to get the most out of life so you don't have to.
Today, as usual, I'm super excited. But we are talking about the hot new topic that's on every media outlet, and that is Britney Spears' new book, The Woman in Me. So if you haven't read it yet and don't want any spoilers, go ahead and turn this off now and come back after you've read the book. So there was so much anticipation for this book to come out for the fans who have loved her for over 20 years, but have rightfully been concerned for her at so many different times. I think the world was just really excited to read her story from her point of view.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody's been talking about it coming out for so long now, and it's finally here. And I read a statistic that it was the number one book with regards to pre-sale, which is huge. But
Oh.
makes sense, of course.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of controversy right now on if she actually wrote it. There's a rumor that potentially her dad was involved in it. After reading it myself, I don't see how he could have been involved in it. It's really negative towards him.
No.
But there is a company that he owns that I believe that company is cited as being involved with the book. Possibly that's just her business, though. And now that he's released from the conservatorship, he's not affiliated with that, even though he did initially found it. So, for the purpose of this podcast, we're going to assume that she really did write the book with ghostwriters, of course.
Right.
But we acknowledge that there is a lot of controversy right now around who wrote the book.
Oh, I did not realize that. I would be shocked if her dad had anything to do with it,
Right?
because he comes off so bad and honestly criminally liable in some cases. So I'd be shocked. But
Same.
but
Yeah.
anything
It's
for
likely not.
controversy, maybe. I don't
Right.
know.
And there are always so many rumors. I mean, as we'll get into, around her, and so many misconceptions. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, look, for the purpose of this, we're going to assume that she did write it. She had a little bit of help, but this is her story in her words.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Well, since I know that you are such a huge Britney fan and you have been for so long, I'm going to pose the rapid fire questions to you, even though we both read the book.
Okay.
But yeah. So my first question is, as a huge Britney fan for over 20 years, how do you feel about her after reading this book?
Oh, that's so hard to answer in a short answer, but I feel sad. I feel like I could almost start crying about her life, and I feel like I want to just support her, which right now as a fan, that feels like giving her positive likes and comments on her Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. In your opinion, what's the most surprising revelation from her memoir that you took away?
Oh, there's so many. Probably the most surprising is how she was treated by the people involved in the conservatorship. I think that everyone kind of was wondering what was going on with that for so many years. And here, reading the horror of what it really was, it was worse than I ever imagined something like that could be to such a powerful icon. I mean, this was happening behind closed doors, but at the same time, right in front of the whole world. And it's just devastating.
Yeah, I agree. Well, then who do you hate more after reading this book, Justin or her dad?
Ugh, equal. They're both
Mm.
horrible. Horrible, right? Ugh,
I know.
they're both the worst.
The
I will
worst,
still
yeah.
listen to NSYNC, but no.
I know my opinion of Justin has changed after reading this book for sure. I
Yeah,
love his music,
me too.
but wow, some of this is bad.
So bad.
Um, yeah. So being newish friends, you and me, there are things that we're still learning about each other. And I just recently learned that you're a huge Britney fan. And have you been at like what, 5 of her concerts?
Yeah. So 5 concerts. The
Wow.
first concert I ever went to, Britney Spears opened for NSYNC. And at the time, it was in 1998. It was the Baby One More Time. was right prior to Baby One More Time. And she joined them as an opener for a few of their shows. And I was there with my sister and we were so excited to see NSYNC, and we didn't know who she was. She came on stage and everybody was like, this auditorium of teenage girls were like, who's this girl? Like get NSYNC on stage.
Yeah.
And immediately, as soon as she started performing, she performed Baby One More Time. It was like, whoa. We were floored. After that concert, the next day, I rushed to Tower Records. I don't know if are you familiar what Tower Records is?
Is it? I
No.
think I've heard of it before, but
Okay. It was like a California-based store that sold CDs and records, but
oh, okay.
we raced to Tower Records and bought her album, and I became an instant fan after that. So I was in high school. She was a high school girl. I went to many more concerts. When I was in high school, I used to try to dress like her. I've been her for Halloween, and my second daughter was born on her birthday.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Have you ever done the denim look with Dave?
No. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I would
you
have
look
loved to
great
do
in
that. I don't think I ever had a boyfriend that would have gone for that or husband. No, I usually did the Baby One More Time look because that's just so cute with like the pom-poms in the hair and the plaid skirt. But I've also been to her In the Zone era concert, which that was when I was in college in 2003. And then I went to Circus in 2008, which that was a really phenomenal tour. I went with my girlfriends. We drove down to LA. It was just phenomenal. And then I went to her Vegas residency twice. So once for my bachelorette party, and then another time for a work event. So I feel like being at a similar age to her, my life has kind of followed suit with hers. And some of the best times of my life have been at her concerts. I know I was telling you separately, but like for my bachelorette party, just like having all of my best friends and my sister and just singing so loud and knowing every single word to every song and even the dance moves to some of her videos. Like she has been this icon in women and men our ages lives. But after reading this book, it really just breaks my heart to think about how she was suffering while her friends, her fans, were having the time of their lives watching her shows. It's just really heartbreaking to think about. Growing up, Britney was everywhere, and I think she represented this like idealistic life. Everyone loved her. Her songs immediately like bring me back to such key memories in high school and college and after. And in her book, she says, singing allows you to say things much more profound. And I think the same thing goes for listening to music. And her specific song, so many of her specific songs hold this really special place for our memories. And I could be driving in a car by myself and I can be brought to tears by one of her songs because it reminds me of like, high school love or college days, or I can just be like cracking up laughing alone, imagining my friends and I going crazy dancing to her, all of us dressing like different versions of Britney Spears for a sorority event. And, it's just, she's such an icon, and it's so interesting to read about her experience. One thing I wanted to note, if you're reading this book or you're done with it or you haven't, I loved looking back on the photos that she referenced in the book. So she referenced, like you just said, the jean outfit, or when she went to the premiere with Colin, she wore a PJ top, and so many of these things she referenced, I remembered, but I loved looking back and looking at the old photos.
That was
her while
cute.
I was reading.
Yeah, I did the
It
same
was
thing. I
really
looked
good.
up all those outfits. I was like, wait, and then as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that picture. I remember that.
Yes.
I remember
Yeah.
that happened. Yeah.
So what was your experience with Britney Spears? How big of a fan were you? Because we're around the same age.
Yeah, I was a huge NSYNC fan and have always been a big Justin fan. And I like Britney Spears. I like her music. I thought it was great to dance to, and I always loved it. I just never went to a ton of concerts, just given my location where I grew up in Florida. We just didn't have a ton of options for lots
Hmm.
of big concerts. They just didn't come our way. I think probably in LA, you guys got everything you
Mhm.
probably could want for concerts, and
Yeah.
we didn't have that opportunity as much. But I loved her music. I had her albums. I would definitely dance around to them and things like that.
Mhm.
I remember i remember loving her, and then I remember watching things sort of devolve over the course
Mhm.
of her life, especially like the shaved head picture and things like that
Mhm.
she posted that were like shocking, and thinking to myself, she's got something going on. I'm not sure what, like wishing her well, but not knowing a lot about what was going on. So this
Yeah.
was very eye-opening for me to hear what was going on, and also to analyze from a psychological perspective in terms of like things I've studied, like abuse and risk and things like that, and resilience that I've seen in her just reading that book. So it was eye opening, especially just to understand her a little bit better, and uh, and also
That
just the facilities that she went to and the things she
Mhm.
had to endure. Coming from the other side of it, being the doctor at some of those facilities, the hearing her perspective is just heartbreaking and makes me think
Mhm.
about other patients in
Mhm.
this a similar situation.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, with your background in education, because the mental illness piece of this, she doesn't address mental illness in this book.
Mm-mm.
And I'm so interested in that and the facilities as well. Before we get into that, so there's a couple different options on how to consume this book. So
Yeah.
I chose the audio version, and um, it was read by Michelle Williams, who I love her. She's fantastic. She's an incredible actress, and I do wish she would have tried to mimic Britney's voice a little bit more. I mean, I have to assume that was a cognitive choice not to, but Britney's voice is so like it stands out, right? Like you could hear her say anything and you just know right away that's Britney Spears, right? Her voice is very unique.
Hmm.
And I love that Brittany did read the prologue, but then it switched over to
Okay.
Michelle Williams reading the book. And
Okay.
Brittany said that she's grateful for Michelle Williams to read the book because it was incredibly painful for her to write this book. And she just couldn't bear to go through that again and read it.
Relive it.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, which makes sense. But I do wish it was a little bit more in her tone. And then I wonder too, like with AI, couldn't they have just had the book done in her voice?
Oh, yeah, you are right about that. They could have done that for sure. They have
So
capabilities to do that now.
it's interesting because
Wow.
I do read or I listen to a lot of celebrity audio books, and most of the ones I've listened to, the author reads it themselves. And
Okay.
when they have such a unique voice, that really makes a difference. But with that said, it was still phenomenal to hear Michelle Williams did sound like Michelle Williams reading it. And maybe that was fine. Now, Megan, I know you opted to, I love this about you. You opted to order the physical book
I
and then
did.
read it cover to cover in
I
one less
did.
than one day, 6 hours.
Yeah, I did. I
That
think I
is
was texting you
incredible.
like, I'm starting it. And then I'm like, I'm on chapter, whatever, whatever. And then I'm like, I'm done. Yeah,
I know.
I actually
Amazing.
didn't, thanks. I didn't mean to read it all at once. I meant to break that up. I just got so engaged in the book, and
Mhm.
I just had to finish it. It was, it's a simple book. It's not a hard to read book, but sometimes
Mhm.
that's nice because you can consume it so fast. And I
Mhm.
did. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a
So
really good, easy read.
We'll have another episode on how to read like Dr. Megan coming up in a few weeks. No,
Oh my gosh.
amazing. I love it. Well,
Thanks.
I'm so glad that you read it. I do too love reading a physical book. And I do think it's setting a good example for your kids to be holding a physical book. And
Hmm.
it's good to intermix with audiobooks.
Yeah.
So let's get in then to looking at it from your education, your perspective. What were
Yeah.
some major themes you noticed as a psychologist, as Dr. Megan?
Yeah. So the biggest one, I think I texted this to you. I was like, oh, this is such a story of risk and resilience. So in my field, we talk a lot about, we try to understand risk factors for, especially for kids, and what risk factors there are for children and how those impact them. What's interesting is how some kids wither in the face of adversity and other ones are so resilient. And there's so many factors that go into that. But for her, listening to how she grew up and actually like the generational aspect of that, how her father grew up and the adversity they had gone through in terms of alcoholism and in terms of really harsh parenting. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
very authoritarian rather than authoritative. It doesn't sound
Mm-hmm.
like it was very warm. Her father was pretty hard on them, both her and her mother. Sounds like she went through different phases of them being together and being apart, and almost
Mm-hmm.
wished that because of his alcoholism and his meanness when he became drunk, that she just wished he would go away. And sometimes he did
Mm-hmm.
for days on end. And that is so unstable for a child to grow up in. And it's such a risk factor for kids, not only sort of the authoritarian aspect of it and the meanness from a parent. That's one aspect. The other aspect of just having instability in the home and not knowing
Mm-hmm.
who your person is and who's in your corner and who's not, because
Mm-hmm.
mom seems a little bit, I don't know if you got this feeling, but pretty
Codependent.
codependent and
Mm-hmm.
weak,
Mm-hmm.
unable to stand up for Britney for what she needed, except when it came to her career. And then
Mm-hmm.
having a father that's just so unreliable and you never know what you're going to get. That unpredictability in your life is such a risk factor for kids. And
Mm-hmm.
so to see her then go through all of that, go through all those experiences, and then on the other side, have early fame is another one I noticed, like a big risk factor for her, media scrutiny, mental
Mm-hmm.
health challenges, her conservatorship. It's like one thing after the other. She had these huge, risky sort of experiences in her life and then was still resilient on the other side of it, still
Mm-hmm.
was productive, still was such a, I mean, she was just a huge star. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work ethic that she had. And I feel like she did fall on work as a way to maybe even be a protective factor for her that caused her to be resilient, is having this
Mm-hmm.
work to do and
Mm-hmm.
feeling so drawn to it and having such joy in performing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was sort of the lens I was looking through. And I marvel at the way that she was able to have so many hits in her life,
Mm-hmm.
one after the other, and still come out the other side resilient. And I think that's such a, I don't know, iconic thing. It's of course Britney, right? She would be
Mm-hmm.
this resilient person in the end and all through it. But I was just marveled about that in
Mm-hmm.
the book.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because I wonder, was she just born a person able to succeed in the face of adversity, or is that come from the confidence of being born someone with incredible talent? Like she is just born an incredibly talented person. There is,
Hmm.
no way around that. And how amazing that even though her family was struggling and she didn't have the best parenting situation, they did make an effort to drive her to far far away. She quoted like an hour away to dance lessons or to
Yeah.
gymnastics, and she would, they took her to audition for the Mickey Mouse Club. Like it seemed like from reading all of the challenges that her family dealt with, that how could people like that possibly take on navigating the career of a child? But in the beginning, especially, they did a pretty good job with that, and
Yeah.
supportive of her career. And maybe that's because of the financial situation they were in, and they did see her as winning the lottery, which is an unfortunate way to look at it for the child. But they did support her into making all of those classes and auditions and things that she needed to get started on the right foot, what seemed, like how it started initially.
Yeah, and I think about her mother too. It seems very weak, unable to protect her from her father, but also was a presence in her life that
Mm-hmm.
I think Brittany capitalized on, where she needed. I think there was a part in the book where she said she looked at one point to see if her mom was there during a practice, and her mom
Yeah.
that one time had left to gone to Walmart, and Brittany fell apart. And
Mm-hmm.
then from there on out, her mother was at every single practice ever since then. Like she never missed another practice. She was always
Right.
there to be a source of,
She
for
was
Brittany.
present.
Yeah, she
Well,
was
and
present.
it's interesting because I read that as that was an outcome of her seeing her mom go through such a traumatic event. And she watched her mom bleed out after her pregnancy
Hmm.
with her sister. And then they took Brittany with them in the car to take the mom to the hospital, which it's crazy how such a scary situation like that, but then ultimately it ended up okay, stayed with her whole life. She was afraid of losing her mom or something happening to her mom.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm interested too in what your thought on her coping strategies um, that she developed through this life of childhood adversity, volatile parents, and then being pushed into working as a child. Sometimes when I would see her in videos or on Instagram now, or even 10 years ago, she appears childlike at times, and we're close to the same age. Her voice tone changes a lot. Like sometimes she has that real baby voice, and then sometimes
Hmm.
she has a grown woman voice. And is stunted growth a thing? Is that a coping mechanism, or what do you see happening there?
Um, I wouldn't say stunted growth would be a coping mechanism. It may be a byproduct of never
Mm.
having been a fully formed person, because
Mhm.
she never had a normal life. She never went through the normal things a kid would go through, and not ever in a safe environment. So
Mhm.
I would imagine she probably grew up faster than she otherwise would have, because she had so many sources of stress in her life. We see that happen in kids, is that when they have multiple sources of stress in their life, that their body tells them to hurry up and grow up, because your body has a sense that life is not going to be very long because there's so
Mhm.
much adversity in your path. So you grow up early, you tend to engage in risky behaviors early, which we see her do. She said she started drinking alcohol with her mom at, I don't, eighth grade. Is that what she said?
Yeah, that floored me. What did you think about that? I was like, "Oh my gosh," like I could not
Yes.
imagine drinking.
Yeah.
And then she was smoking cigarettes, and
Yeah.
that's just crazy, that young child. She kept I wonder what your thoughts are actually growing up in the South. Like she kept referring to a lot of the things that may be perceived as negative is, oh, that's how we do it in the South. I'm from the South. We do this in the South. And I'm
Hmm.
not from the South, but I was like, wow, I mean, I don't know. What do you think being from the South? Did you drink and do those things when you were in eighth grade because you were from the South?
No, I did not. And I think that might be a byproduct of her social economic status of where she was growing up too. So it
Mm,
sounds like they were very poor, maybe uneducated. I'm not sure, but it seemed like in Mississippi, the backwoods, maybe things are swept under the rug a little bit more, just more lenient out that way. There is a sense, like aside from Brittany, there is a sense of like, this is just how the South does it. And that's sort of like a justification for anything that the South does. And it's
okay.
like a circular reasoning. It's not actually like rational. There's like reasons why things happen or why they don't. And just because of where you're from is not really a good way. But
Hmm.
I think she may really believe that that's just how Mississippi does it, and that could be the case. But so I've studied like early onset sex behavior, early onset substance use as risks for kids that they
Hmm.
engage in early. you tend to see that happen in people who go through puberty early and who have a lot of stress in their life, and their bodies are telling them, grow up, have sex, have babies, engage in risky behaviors. You tend to have just more of that fast lifestyle. And you see that for Britney. And I do wonder whether that does in some way stunt your growth, because you go through puberty so quick and you start engaging in adult behaviors before your body is actually, and your brain is actually ready to do so. Doing those things during puberty changes brains and for the rest of your life. So it could be that doing these things so early for her did change her ultimate trajectory of her life and cause her to just be a little bit more childlike, or maybe that's just a persona. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see, she was adaptive. I feel like that was one huge source for her. She adapted to a lot of really difficult situations, and she did so for a very long amount of time sometimes, especially during the conservatorship. She was still looking for ways to be hopeful, things to be happy about. Those vacations mattered a lot to her with her kids. I think she continued to have like a positive outlook, or she at least tried to. And it was really the moments when she lost hope that things crumbled for her. I feel like when she just gave up, that's really when you started to see things crumble, when she regained that hope and that sense of, I can do it, especially for ending her conservatorship. That was when she really shone. That sense of hope and that positive outlook can change your behavior, but it's hard to get. So it's
Yes, she
impressive for
really,
her.
it is impressive. She really was just this like very positive outlook and really glass half full and grateful. And, you
Mm-hmm.
always hear about the importance of gratitude in one's life, but she wanted this so bad from when she was a little girl. She said she was watching Madonna's music videos when she was in kindergarten, and she wanted that for herself. And here you are watching that happen and living that experience not many years after, and the gratitude that she had for everything that was happening almost overshone any of the negative, and
Yeah.
she really remained grateful and positive for so long. She had a higher tolerance for putting up with BS in her life,
Mm-hmm.
I think, because of that gratitude. Another thing, I had this further down in the notes, but another thing that stuck out to me is she referenced that it was a trait because she was coming from the South, and that is she's submissive towards men. She's submissive towards her dad. Then she
Mm-hmm.
sought out partners later in life that she was submissive towards. She learned that from her mom. Her mom was submissive to her dad. She referenced that she would argue a point with her dad and she'd look at her mom for support and her mom would just look away. And I
Yeah.
can't imagine that that's from being in the South. Like, did you just see that as family structure? Or she was heavily involved in a church. I know sometimes some types
Yeah.
of churches put that out there, but that seemed like a common and dangerous theme in her life, is that she really was allowing men in her life at various times to make decisions for her that were not of her best benefit, or, to help her.
Yeah, I do think, unfortunately, that there is a tendency to conserve sort of older ways of thinking in the South, and some of those are good, and this is one of them that I think is maybe not as good, is that there is an undertone of women being submissive to men, and some of that does come, I think, from Christianity, and it comes from like religious sources where it says in the Bible to do those things, to be submissive to the leader of the home, who is the man. And so that works if the man of the home is doing a really good job of advocating and supporting and taking care of everybody in his life. But that doesn't work in cases like Britney, where she needs to be submissive to her father because it's culturally accepted that that's what's going to be expected of her. And then he just does not do what's best for her and steals from her and takes from her. And throughout her life, basically, is a source of just like draining her,
Mm-hmm.
and just a leech, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And It's unfortunate that's the case. I do think that is less out here in the Bay Area. Like women having power and strength is celebrated. And if
Mm-hmm.
women don't have power and strength, there's things like sponsorship where men are supposed to use their place of power to lift other women into those places of power where they should be. There's
Mm-hmm.
things like these, like more progressive ideas out here that
Mm-hmm.
I think are less common in the South,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. But I do see that tide changing over time as I'm going through, went through grad school in the South, and I had a lot of progressive ideas sort of taught to me even in the South. So I think it depends on your community and it depends on that, but
Mm-hmm.
there is an undercurrent, I would say,
Yeah. It is. It's
unfortunately.
interesting. Yeah. I mean, the way she
Yeah.
even mentioned that she still refers to people as Mr. and Mrs. as a grown adult. She's referring to people as that. And, I mean, I know there are different upbringings and different
Yeah.
ways. And I did grow up in California with very liberal, very progressive parents. But it's so many points I'm listening to the way that she's responding to the media or managers and her dad and boyfriends. And I would have never stood for that. I was taught to speak up. Even as a child, I would have given them the biggest F you and told my parents if somebody spoke to me that way. And her willingness to allow people to speak to her, treat her in certain ways, and she has the same submissive manners that her mom had in so many cases. Um, I don't want this to come off as victim shaming at all because it's not, but it's just heartbreaking that
Yeah.
she wasn't empowered at any point in her life to fully stand up for herself. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to
Yeah.
make, that it just
I
breaks my
agree.
heart that she was Britney Spears. She was this powerful, wealthy icon, and she was being controlled by so many others.
I don't see her as fully actualized as a person either. I don't think she ever fully grew up. So I think that's one aspect of this for
Mm-hmm.
her, is that she never actually fully became Britney Spears, or that was like her. I think she had a strong identity, but only insofar as it pertained to her career. It wasn't the inside of her, it felt like, was missing something where to stand up the way you're talking about. The other thing though that I think about when you're mentioning that is that if you are in the environment she's talking about and you are a woman, you play the game. You
Mm-hmm.
have to. There's no other
Mm-hmm.
option for you.
Yes.
You must play the game, and you must manipulate it in some way, shape, or form to make yourself still successful in spite
Mm-hmm.
of what's holding you back. And
Mm-hmm.
I see that in a lot of strong Southern women, is that they do have to play within the game, the system that they're given, but also they find ways to make sure it doesn't hold them back. And it's
Mm-hmm.
harder, but it's what the reality of it is. And so I think about that for her too, is how much of that was her not being fully actualized and how much of that is her being super effective in the environment she grew up in.
That's interesting. Manipulating the situation in her own way and
Yeah.
in some ways maybe controlling the environment. Oh, that's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
perspective. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I love how you added in the notes about being hot and smart.
Yeah, that was something I noticed. So risk and resilience was one huge thing. The other is the number of dialectics that she had to deal with in her life. And
Mm,
so dialectics come from like two opposite truths being true at the same time within one person. And
mhm,
we teach people in psychology, this is healthy. It is okay to have what may seem as opposites being true for the same person at the same time. And you can accept that. But what happened for her, because she was in the spotlight, is that these dialectics were sort of pushed on her. And like things like, you can't be hot and smart. Two things
mhm,
can't be true at the same time. And it's like, well, that's clearly not true. She was very smart in her field. She was very successful and effective at navigating. Being successful and respected as an artist versus being shamed by media and the public.
mhm,
She had a lot of these things fighting, I think, within her because she was so reliant on external sources to tell her how to think and how to behave, that she had to then take those in and figure out how they fit with one another. And that causes a lot of emotional turmoil for anybody to have to put those together and
Yes.
say, both can't be true of me, or people are saying both can't be true of me, but how can that be? Because I feel
Mhm.
it is true of me. So, and then, all these emotions come out of that because you have a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of extra that you have to deal with. And she
Yes.
had all of that. That's so much more stress than any of us really have to deal with on
Oh
a
my
daily
gosh.
basis.
Can you even imagine having the whole world have opinions on you that just sounds so overwhelming, and that
Mm-hmm.
from being a child on to have so many eyes on every little thing that you're doing. Of course she's coming off as crazy now, right? Because that's a crazy life that she's lived, and that gives me anxiety just thinking about that, just having so many criticisms of you. And especially she pointed out that it was confusing to her to receive so much criticism when she was just doing what she loved, and she was really good at what she loved. She was just singing and dancing, and she was phenomenal. So for the world or the media to then find any negative at all within that is shocking.
I know. Yeah. I mean, people said she wasn't a good role model.
Mhm.
They didn't like the way she dressed. They didn't like any of this. But then her opinion of that is like, well, I didn't want to be a role model. I want to be a
Yeah.
performer. So if
Yeah,
you don't like my performance,
exactly.
just don't come to my shows. It's like, well, that makes it pretty
Right.
simple, right? Like we
Mhm.
don't need to like slut shame people um,
Mhm.
and
Ugh.
say that they must be like a mentor to our children. Not everybody's a
Right?
mentor to kids, and that I don't think she was one. So
No.
that's okay. That's not her. That wasn't what she was aiming for, anyways.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested about you. What themes did you notice? You're such a huge Britney fan. It was so much
I
historicity
know.
here. What do you think stood out?
I mean, so much stood out. I think that the biggest thing that stood out was misogyny, the poor treatment of her from people in her
Mm-hmm.
life and the media. And it took me back to, we were all watching it happen to her. And, the early 2000s was definitely a different time,
Mm-hmm.
but the treatment of her was vile by even standards back then. And as a
Agreed.
mom now of little girls, I went back and watched a few of the clips referenced in the book, interviews that she had, and it makes me want to throw up. It's so crazy the questions that she was asked. I mean, she was 11 when Ed McMahon asked her to be, jokingly, of course, but it's not funny, asked her to be his girlfriend, or if he could be her boyfriend on air. He's like bending down and joking to her, and she's 11. And gross. Like,
Yeah.
what a disgusting thing to have to go through. And others talking about if her breasts were real, and these grown ass men sitting there with this 17-year-old girl. And I mean, shame on them. They should have known better. And looking at her and saying, "Are your breasts real?" I mean, oh my God, that's insane. And it breaks my heart to think that we all watched it and it was a little cringy, but no one really said anything except for Oprah. And I went
Mm-hmm.
back and I watched the Oprah clip, and Oprah said to her, "Your virginity and your body are no one's business." And I just love that. And in that moment, you can see Britney as just being this really impressionable young girl looking for some direction. And that
Oh.
that was an amazing moment, in that it was, I don't want to dwell on it too much because it really doesn't matter, but it was surprising to me that she did share that she had sex when she was 14 and she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a virgin. And I do remember the whole world talking about her being a virgin. And I remember when Justin shared that they were intimate together. And it's interesting that there was this whole marketing package put out there of her, and part of it was, "You're going to be a virgin." And how confusing would that be to a young woman who's like, oh, but I'm not. But this is what I'm going to be telling people. And why do you have to tell people that? Just
Oh,
really
I
kind of
know.
heartbreaking and unnecessary. And I am grateful that I do now believe that none of that would be tolerated in this day and age.
Right.
So we
Mm-mm.
should not be seeing that going forward. People would get Me Too'd so quick.
I know.
Uh,
Thank goodness, though, right? Like there needs to be some sort of standard for behavior, and especially like crossing that line with a youth, somebody under 18, is so freaking inappropriate. It's inappropriate no matter what, but it's so much worse when it's a teenager, and just, it's just disgusting.
yeah, it's
So
just
yeah.
disgusting. It's really heartbreaking and sad. But I think that the other surprising themes were that her dad, how terrible her dad really was. Like we had seen glimpses of that in the media, but dad is just so important in a daughter's life. And I always joke that most of the confidence that I have came from my dad. He used to always tell me, like, Sarah, you're a 10. And I believe that as an adult. And when I go into situations, I'm like, I'm a 10. And that
Mm-hmm.
comes from him. And I watch how my husband is with my daughters. And for her to have the type of dad that she has, it came off as abusive, even though it doesn't sound like he was physically abusive. He was
Oh, he was
emotionally,
definitely verbally abusive.
right?
Absolutely. Yes.
And
And
just like,
constricting her calories, things like that when
oh
she was
my
under his
gosh,
conservatorship, that is abusive. I'm
that is abusive, right?
shocked. Yes.
Shocked.
It's
I want to
so
get
sad.
further into the conservatorship too with you because I have a
Oh,
lot of questions on that.
so
But let
gross.
me,
Yeah.
I think that the relationship with her dad did then push her into making poor choices with men throughout her life. And,
Agreed.
I think Justin Timberlake has always been known as kind of like a D-bag. Obviously, like he's cheated on Jessica Biel and
Mm-hmm.
that came out and it's so sad. But the
Oh.
realization of who he is in this book, I mean, the fact that she had an abortion, that's crazy the way he handled it. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember where I was in college when Cry Me a River came out. And I remember buying the CD and
Oh, I
sitting in
loved
my,
it. I know, me too.
right?
Yes.
But I was sitting in my purple Camaro and I put that CD in and listening to that song and just being floored. Like she wronged him. She did something
Uh-huh.
so bad to him. And to learn through her book that that wasn't true, that he had been cheating on her all along, that is sickening.
Yeah. It seems like such gaslighting for that to
Yes.
happen to her, and then she has no voice either to say, no, this didn't really happen, this is not how this happened. Nobody cared. All they cared about with that was that song because it was such a huge hit and it painted
Mhm,
such a mark on her. So I
mhm,
know I loved that song. I was like in
mhm.
love with that song, in love with that music video. I loved it. And I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, Brittany, gosh, you really hurt this poor kid. He's
I
so handsome.
know.
How could you do that? You know? And now to find out, and I think the same thing. I remember that the scandal came out a couple of years ago that he was like in New Orleans. He's married to Jessica Biel with kids. And there were pictures taken of him holding some other girl's hand under the
Mhm.
table. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, that it can't be. He can't be doing that,
Yeah,
right? Now reading this book, it's like, of course he was doing that. And he probably still is
right.
doing that
He
to
probably
his
does it
wife.
all the time. I
Oh,
know. It's
it's
so
sad.
sad.
He's
And
not a
just to
catch.
think, no, ew, he's
Mm-mm.
so repulsive after reading this. And I mean, to think too, like the trauma of just like going through the breakup of your first love publicly, like, oh my gosh, I think back
I
to like, my
know.
first love, like that breakup is, you're so young and you're so emotional and it's so traumatic. And to have that be public and then to have the person change the narrative to be so negative to you, like, what a horrific ordeal.
I know. I
Just so
know.
sad. And then, she moved on to other poor choices and ultimately married Kevin Federline, who
Ugh.
I I randomly like saw him years ago at a party in LA and
You
oh,
did?
I did. I mean, it was like during the time
Oh,
when I was going to these like big parties in LA, and even from, 10 feet away, I was like grossed out. He is not a catch.
yeah. I had no idea who he was when Britney started dating him and then married him. I was like, I have no idea who this guy is, but seems like a poser. He doesn't seem like a cool guy. That's not
No.
cool. I don't know what she's after at that point.
Well, and then
Um,
how sad that she said in the book he was married, or I don't know, not maybe not married, but he had a child and a pregnant girlfriend when he was first with her, and she didn't
I
know. Like,
know. I know.
it's
And
so sad.
finding that out though and still marrying him, that's just
I
part
know.
of the pattern of bad choices she made with men, which is so unfortunate. And I think she was just looking for love anywhere because she never got it, like you said, from her father.
Mm-hmm.
And she was looking so hard for external validation from people that she's okay and that she's loved. And then she would just pick these horrible guys that gave it to her, but have a horrible track
Mm-hmm.
record she could just disregard, so it
And
sucks.
wasn't it interesting how her biggest selling point of Kevin was she said that he would hold her in the
Yeah.
swimming pool for hours? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, that would drive me crazy. I'd be like, I can't get out of here fast enough. Are you kidding me? That guy holding
Yeah.
you in a swimming pool for hours? But her little heart needed
Her need for
so much
love.
love.
Yeah. It was her. It sounds like
Oh,
her heart was just empty and just looking for somebody to fill it. And he did it for a little bit of time. And I think,
this room.
yeah,
No, go ahead.
I was going to say this is like reminiscent for her, though, that it's part of her adaptive functioning too, that she can look from person to person to person to person and get what she needs out of them in that moment. It just is unfortunate for her that none of those things lasted, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was kind of laughing because it reminded me, I think you or your husband brought up the meme about like, I'm going to treat my daughter to all these nice things. So
Oh,
some,
yeah.
what is that?
The dusty sun.
Yeah.
The dusty sun. There's like this guy on Instagram. He does all these videos and he's like, I'm taking my daughter out for tea time so your dusty son doesn't take her to Golden Corral when she grows older or something. He's like sipping tea at the same time. But there's all these dusty sun memes out there, which I think is
So
hysterical.
the girl doesn't think these gross, trashy things are
Yeah.
special. And
Right.
Britney Spears is the perfect example of this. Like
Yeah.
her standards were really low. Oh my God. Like Britney Spears, like she should have been marrying like David Beckham,
Uh-huh.
not these gross, weird men that were not
Yeah.
loyal to her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now I know she didn't, the book came out before this happened, but now she is getting divorced and
Oh, she is?
she
I didn't
is,
know
and
that from the guy that's
oh,
in the book that he's some.
he's yeah.
Okay.
And there is like this very bizarre video that's available right now. So it's rumored that she's getting divorced because she cheated on him with a contractor or a gardener that was working in her home. And there
Mm.
is a video right now of the contractor or gardener, and um, he is walking down the street and he's approached by media and they're asking if he is with Britney, and he smirks and smiles, and he rambles on and on about how he's got multiple children with multiple different women. One's in prison, one's being held on a 5150 in a mental
Oh,
institution, and he's a good
gosh.
dad. And there's rumors that he moved his family and his children into Britney's home. And it's, who knows how much of this is true, but her husband and her are getting divorced and he has moved
Okay.
out. And at one point, this other man has been photographed to have been with her. And he's definitely not like the quality type of person that you would have. He looks like he just walked out of prison. I mean, he's not somebody that you would think Britney Spears would be with.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
that's unfortunate. I think that's a
I
pattern,
know.
unfortunately, that's going to just like follow her. Unless she accidentally trips into a really good relationship, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think she's going to find one. Just
Yeah.
because that's like her pattern. She probably could if she got some like psychological help, maybe somebody
Mm-hmm.
to help her reflect upon the relationships that she's had and what to look for, what values she has. Like she just, again, the actualization part, like she may not even know what her values are. she needs to
Mm,
think about that and think about what
mhm,
fits that value scheme that she comes up with in terms of maybe aspirationally what she wants to be and what she wants for her family. But
mhm.
she's sort of, yeah, it's unfortunate. I feel bad for
Yeah.
her.
She has low standards. Well, let's move into something a little more positive
Okay.
because we do love her so much and there is
Yeah.
positive. There is so much good. And I just love it's so sweet to hear how passionate she was and is about music and dancing, and that she was born an incredibly talented person. Like, what a gift.
Hmm.
And she really just thrived in a less than ideal childhood in pursuing her passions and turning them into a career. um, I love how she quoted that you have to tell your story and you have to raise your voice. So I think that she is growing, evolving, and speaking up more. And it was so cute to read about how Madonna helped give her some of that power,
Yeah.
which makes sense. I love Madonna, and obviously she seems like of course,
She's
a
so
very
strong.
so
Yeah.
strong, right? Very
Yeah.
powerful. Nobody would get one over on her. She is in charge of her life and making decisions. Nobody's going to get Madonna into a conservatorship.
Right. Oh gosh. Yeah. She would fight you.
Right?
No
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
But that was really sweet to read about that connection, and that Madonna then was in Britney's music video to help support her. And
Yeah.
then the other theme that was just so sweet was her love for her children. Like, she
Yeah.
really loves those boys and is wanting to be a really good mom to them. She talks so much about co-sleeping, and
Hmm.
that I co-slept with my babies, and that was just so sweet to read about how she treasured that time with
Yeah.
them. But then again, it was sad to read about how the media spun her as not being a good mom, and she really broke down the situation that we all saw in the media when she didn't put her child in a car seat. And she broke down that if you watch the video of it, that there are paparazzi surrounding the car, and that the photos that the media printed make it look like a completely different situation than it was. And as a mom, she had a 1.5-year-old and she was pregnant. Like, what a horrific situation to be in when you have all these grown men surrounding your car and taking photos of you and yelling at you. And it's so scary. She didn't have anybody
Yeah.
there helping to protect her.
Yeah. That was scary. And that, I mean, that just speaks to, I think, the limitations that need to be put on the paparazzi for these
Hmm.
celebrities. I mean, look at Princess Diana,
I
like
know.
people are scared when they get surrounded like that and they're trying to take pictures of their babies and they're thinking is protection and they're like, stomp on it, get me out of here. And I,
Yes.
I can understand that instinct.
I can too. And when your baby is screaming and crying, it's hard to put them in a car seat. And there's this scary situation. I totally felt for her and could see myself handling the situation the same way as a new mom, because you are in mama bear mode and you just have to get your child to safety.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So let's go into the conservatorship a little bit, because I followed it in the media and it was always so confusing. I loved reading in the book that she was watching and she was appreciative of the Free Britney movement.
Hmm.
But I know you have experience with understanding how these work for mental health patients and criminals. Do you want to get into the legality of a little bit of it and what your opinion is?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I will have to say that the details of why she herself would be placed under a conservatorship are really hazy because she doesn't quite go into it in her book. And all the court records and the court documents around that decision are sealed. So we
Oh.
really don't know what evidence they had that she needed the conservatorship, but at some point, people who are experts like doctors would be in that room deciding that she needs this conservatorship. So usually a
Mm.
conservatorship is for people who cannot make healthy choices on their own volition due to cognitive defect or mental illness. So under US law, a conservatorship results from the appointment of a guardian or a protector by a judge, and they can either manage personal or financial affairs of a person, or in Britney's case, both, because they are not capable of fully managing their own affairs due to age. Sometimes this happens to children because they don't have parents and they need a conservator, or it could be due to physical or mental limitations. So from my read of what happened, did she seem cognitively capable? Yes. Like, I didn't see any defect there. She doesn't qualify, or she's never mentioned before any sort of intellectual problems. And so I don't think it came from that. It probably did come from the mental illness argument, that she meets criteria for X, Y, or Z. And she, again, doesn't really go into that as much in the book either, what she's been diagnosed with. But did she have mental illness? I do think they would have had to determine, to some extent, yes, or that would have been their argument. So we do read, though, that when she was in one of the hospitals, she was put on lithium, and that is primarily used to treat bipolar. And I've gone back and looked at some of what she has said in the past about having bipolar, and she has said publicly that she has been diagnosed with that. It doesn't seem to me, I don't know if you got this read, I don't think she agrees that she needs that treatment. And if anything, it made her feel very hazy and unable to think.
Yeah, that's how I read it too. And is lithium still used today? It sounds like such a dated, a dated medication and a dated treatment.
It is really hard to be on. There are new wave therapies and medications that I think are tried first nowadays. People will try these other new ones that have less side effects first, because lithium is so hard to be on. There's so many side effects that you have to deal with when you're on it. But for some severe cases, lithium is what continues to work for those people. And so it is still considered a viable option for treating bipolar. Some things that I think might concern me if I was maybe a doctor in the case would be like some of the risky situations she said she put herself in, like, and then not really knowing, we really don't know how much of the risk that she put herself in sort of also leaked out onto her kids. Because again, all of that's sealed, but like the story about how she did a 360 in the car right next to the side of a mountain where she could have just fallen off, but she stuck it. She had such a thrill from that experience. But from my perspective, I would be concerned about those sorts of behaviors, because, if she's doing a lot of those sort of risky things, then that could put her life in danger. And perhaps that might be where the conservatorship came from. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wish that she would have said in the book what she believes her diagnosis to be, because she doesn't say anything about her illness, her diagnosis. She doesn't admit to having any type of mental illness. And to your point, it does seem that she views all of the treatment as completely unnecessary. And that made me feel a little bit like, more unhealthy, right? It would be healthy to admit when you're struggling a little bit and you do need some of the treatment or some of the help, but she came off as adamantly not wanting or needing any of it. And that almost is more concerning.
Yeah. One thing we talk about for patients is like level of insight. And some patients really have deep insight to what their problems are and where they need help. And some patients have no insight into what they need. And I wonder her level of insight. And then I also wonder whether she can say, I have anything, because if she ever says anything like that, she may be concerned and scared, and rightly so, that would be used against her in a court of law. You have X, Y, or Z. So therefore because we've already seen the conservatorship, which is bonkers, be given to her, and she has to live through that for 13 years. And it's like just hell, it sounds like. And not the least restrictive thing that the judge could have chosen. There are other
Right.
less restrictive, and you should always ethically choose the least restrictive option that there is for somebody. I don't think that sounds like that happened.
No, and it's, I mean, there's obviously like bipolar is there's people living successful, wonderful lives all over with bipolar, and they're
Yeah.
medicated accordingly, and they have happy, successful lives. So it can't be that just the diagnosis of bipolar allowed her to be in this horrible situation. I mean, is it possible that it was just highly manipulated by her family because of the money at stake here, or that there's something else going on that we don't know?
I really don't know. I would have
Mhm.
to imagine, I would hope that there would be substantial evidence, lots of indications and experiences that multiple people can account that she put herself in a very risky situation or she made a very
Mhm.
dangerous choice. And then using that to say she's got, is not able to make decisions for herself.
Mhm.
So I would have to imagine there'd have to be a lot of evidence in such a case, but this is before reforms were created, and the reforms were created because of Britney Spears,
Oh,
especially in California
really?
law. Yeah. So
Oh,
Governor
wow.
Newsom recently, maybe like a year ago or so, in response to the Free Britney movement and the concerns about conservatorship and the way that it's determined, to put more guardrails on that system and give more autonomy and power to the person being placed in conservatorship to choose their conservator, even if
Mm.
that's a independent, uninvolved person. That would have been a better selection than her abusive father, honestly.
Right. I mean, do you think that her father should have criminal responsibility in this?
I,
I
I
do.
I do. I mean, I don't know a ton about the law or the way that that would happen, but in terms of my reading, there are a lot. If you go online and you read about this, it sounds like multiple lawyers online have said like she has a case against at least suing him
Mhm.
for the money that he took during her conservatorship from her pot of money. That wasn't his, it was hers. And
Yes.
the abuse of things like making her go to camps to work out 24/7 during her apparent when she's committed at a facility that's like just causing her
Mhm.
to work out nonstop. That is, and then lying to her and telling her she
Mhm.
couldn't select her own lawyer or that she had no representation. That is
Yes.
bonkers to me that someone
I
so
know.
wealthy, someone who has so much at her disposal, could be manipulated in that way and believe
Mhm.
that for so long. It's really sad.
Yes, and that she was working with a public defender that seemed to be working more with her dad, and it's just so sad. I'm so happy she got that amazing lawyer that she did end up working with. So, having insight into mental facilities, what did you think about her recalling the ones she had been in? Are they all really that bad? Because that was devastating.
Yeah, they are. I can't really
Oh,
sugarcoat
really?
that. They're rough and they're scary places to be. Not just for patients, but for doctors too. You really can never predict what's going to be happening around you when people are responding to external stimuli that aren't there. That they're erratic potentially, especially if they're like unmedicated and there to get stabilized. It can be a scary experience, and depending on where you're placed. But I've worked in a lot of the state-run facilities, and I've often thought to myself what she's voiced in the book, which is what it's like to be a patient in that facility and see people coming and going, but you can never leave. And that just broke my heart because I've had many patients like that where I'm coming and going and I've thought of them when I'm leaving and thinking to myself, I can't believe that person can't leave and they may never leave. They may never leave
Mm.
the facility, like unlikely. And how heartbreaking and just like hopeless that person must feel
Yeah.
in that situation, and feels like she felt like that. And
Mhm.
that is not the purpose of those facilities. Those facilities are there to rehabilitate people and help them get back on their feet and give them a sense of support and give them a sense of hope and
Mhm.
stabilize them. Yes, but help give resources. And it doesn't feel like she was given that. And unfortunately, I don't think her experience is uncommon.
Oh, that's
So
so sad to
I
hear. That's
know.
so sad. Yeah, it was so heartbreaking to read about how she was forced to be in those situations, and all the while her family was on vacations in places
I
that she
know.
was paying for. It's just like, wow, I cannot imagine a family in this situation not rallying around and supporting the person in their family that is dealing with this mental illness or this need for help. And that just triggers, or it just is maybe a reminder of that the reason she's distanced from them now is probably okay, right? They're probably
Yeah.
not great people the way they treated her. And obviously, like the things that she said about her sister were
I
really sad. And
know. Oh,
it was kind of surprising because as like an older sister, you would think like, I think of my younger sister as an adult, but I think of her as like,
yeah.
my baby still, and you protect them and you take care of them. And she
Yeah.
really has a lot of hate for her little sister in this book. And it's sad to see that, because you would have hoped that her sister would have supported her more.
I know. That's what sisters are for. Yeah, that
Right?
was really, really sad.
It was
Um,
really sad.
but really
I know.
altogether, I do think this book is like overall a positive read, even though there were a lot of
Mhm.
sad parts there. And I think it's good to understand where she came from and understand all the struggles she went through and also her resilience, because I think
Mhm.
maybe others are out there struggling the way that she has struggled, maybe not in the same exact way, but finding the supports that you can find and finding that resilience within yourself can be so liberating and freeing from past trauma. So
That's
um,
so well
good on
said, Megan.
her.
I love that. I think too that reading this book, it's amazing, and I'll probably will read it again. It's the type of book that like it was really enjoyable to read. It makes sense how she is now. So for a few years now, everybody is seeing what she's doing on Instagram, and it's very risque and it's odd sometimes. But she points out that she's aware of what people are saying about what she's doing on Instagram, and she doesn't care because she's taking control of her life and her body. And for so many years, others had control over what she wore and what she ate and how she danced. And now she's going to do it how she wants, and she doesn't care if people think she has bad style, but it makes her feel good about herself and it makes her happy. And I loved hearing that. And it did make sense to me now, the way
Yeah.
she is on Instagram, and there's some joy in that. And I don't think anymore I'll look at her Instagram and be like, "Oh, that's so weird," and "What is happening?" Instead, I think I'm going to be like, "Yeah, you go, girl. You do exactly what you want to do and have fun, and I still love you and I love your music, and
Yeah.
I hope that things will work out well for her."
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree. Well, I would say so. Three takeaways from
Mhm.
this episode and from the book is just number one, read the book. Is a really fast read and a lot of fun to
Yeah.
read. Number two, support Brittany if you feel that, if you're feeling called to support her, I would do it and follow her on Instagram. And if you're reading, if you're making comments, give her some love because we know that she is reading those. I mean, she's an artist. Artists are sometimes eccentric and come up with crazy ideas. She's not an anomaly in that way. So if she's doing things
Mhm.
that are a little bit nutso, I mean, I just think support her and give her some time and space to get out what she needs to get out because she's been so repressed for so long. And
Mhm.
then
I love that.
number three, I'm
Yeah.
going to throw it to you, Sarah.
Oh yeah, I just reading this book was so great, and it kind of reminded me that I love celebrity books. Like celebrities often become celebrities because, like you said, they're eccentric and
Yeah.
they're crazy characters, right? So I'm gonna read Julia Fox's book next, and
Oh,
I heard it's really wacko, and she seems like an odd one, but I heard she's got some cool stories, so I'm gonna
oh,
read that next.
cool.
Do you know who she
Okay.
is? Are you interested in that
No.
book?
Wait, what is that? Yeah, tell me about
Ju-
that.
Julia Fox, she dated Kanye very briefly recently, but
Oh,
her
yeah.
stories are about
I know who she
being a
is.
model and dominatrix in LA.
Oh,
Ooh,
wow.
I know.
You have to tell me how
So
that
I
one
think
is. Yeah.
so that one's going to be a little interesting and crazy read. And she talks a lot about Kanye, and that'll be interesting to see some
Yeah.
shed some light on what's going on with that mental health situation there. But
Sure.
yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. That's all for this episode of Platinum Perspective. Thank you for listening. Tune in every week for more beauty, psychology, luxury, and travel. Please tell your friends to rate, like, and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.